Welcome to the Deep Dive. You're here because you want to get smart, fast, on something truly interesting, and that's exactly what we're about.
Yeah.
Today, we're plunging into the fascinating currents of ancient wisdom traditions, drawing primarily from the secret teachings of all ages.
It's quite a journey.
Think of this as your curated tour through some seriously mind-bending, but ultimately enlightening ideas.
That's right. We've pulled together a diverse range of ancient thought for you, from philosophical schools like the Pythagoreans and Socratics, to the intriguing mystery traditions, think Eleusis, the Druids, and, well, beyond.
Right.
We'll even touch on Hermeticism and a few other interconnected threads. Our goal is really to extract the key insights about what these ancient thinkers believed about reality, human nature, the pursuit of knowledge.
All without overwhelming you.
Exactly. Keep it manageable but deep.
Okay, so let's dive straight in. What struck me right away in our sources is how fundamental these ancient cultures considered both their mystery traditions and philosophy. It seems they weren't always separate pursuits, were they?
That's a really interesting point to consider. Philosophy, as we've, come to know it, actually grew out of the decline of these earlier religious mysteries. So if you want to understand the very roots of Western thought, getting a handle on what those initiated priests were teaching is, well, it's crucial.
So the core insight is that ancient wisdom wasn't just belief, but a deep understanding passed down.
Precisely. Passed down through these traditions.
Right. And these mysteries weren't just some quaint rituals. They were the keepers of profound, life-changing knowledge, weren't they?
Oh, absolutely.
Knowledge that was carefully guarded and only revealed to those who had truly dedicated themselves to something, beyond their own egos.
Exactly. These weren't fringe groups either. Some of the most respected philosophers of the ancient world thinkers whose ideas still shape our understanding, they were initiates.
Really?
Yeah. They themselves spoke to the effectiveness and truth they found within these secret teachings. It makes you wonder what kind of understanding they possessed that we might have, lost.
It's almost a shock to realize that even the early ideals of Christianity seem to have been influenced by the moral codes of these so-called pagan mysteries. I even read that in the early days, Christians sometimes repurposed Mithraic temples for their own worship. That shows a real interconnectedness.
It really does. And if we step back and look at the bigger picture, the ancient world generally believed that a solid grasp of nature and its underlying laws was essential for living a meaningful life.
Right.
The mysteries played a key role in educating people about these divine laws as they operated in our world. The takeaway here is that for them, knowledge wasn't just academic, it was fundamental to how you lived.
And it sounds like these early spiritual practices were less about blind faith and more about conscious self-development.
Definitely.
They were more moralistic and philosophical, focusing on using our minds effectively, cultivating patience and courage, and seeing a life well lived as the highest offering. It shifts how you think about ancient religion.
This really challenges our modern assumptions about what ancient spirituality was. It wasn't necessarily about just appeasing deities. It was often a structured path of self-improvement and understanding the deeper principles governing existence.
Okay, now let's zoom in on some of these key philosophical schools and the thinkers who shaped them. Let's start with the legendary Pythagoras.
Pythagoras.
For him, mathematics wasn't just about numbers on a page, was it? It was something much deeper.
Absolutely. Pythagoras considered mathematics the most sacred science. He believed that arithmetic, music, astronomy, and geometry weren't just subjects to be studied, but essential keys to understanding the fundamental harmony and order of the cosmos.
So the core insight is the universe wasn't random, but governed by math.
That's the heart of it. For Pythagoras, it was all about principles.
And it wasn't just an intellectual exercise. He really emphasized living a certain kind of life, a philosophical life, as a prerequisite for gaining true wisdom.
That's crucial.
He even established a whole community where his students could support each other in their pursuit of higher knowledge. It sounds almost like an ancient research collective.
It kind of was. And beyond the structured learning, Pythagoras introduced practices like retrospection, a deliberate form of self-reflection, which he saw as vital for spiritual growth. His school truly delved into metaphysical questions, exploring the fundamental relationship between numbers and the forces that shape reality. It wasn't just about equations, it was about the very fabric of existence.
Oh, and we can't forget the music of the spheres. That idea of a celestial harmony created by the movement of the planets is still such a powerful image.
It really is. And John Roysland pointed out that the very first thing Pythagoras taught his students was silence.
Silence.
Yeah, as the essential first step towards contemplation. That's profound, isn't it?
It really highlights the idea that true understanding often begins with quieting the noise within.
Exactly. And it's fascinating that even something like rhetoric, the art of persuasive speaking, was credited to Empedocles, a Pythagorean, by Aristotle.
Shows their influence was broad.
Very broad. And both Pythagoras and Empedocles shared a belief in transmigration, the idea of the soul moving through different life forms.
Right, I remember that quote.
Which Empedocles famously described in verse. A boy I was, then did a maid become, a plant, bird, fish, and in the vast sea swum. It gives you a sense of their cosmic perspective.
That's quite a vivid image. And then there's Archytas, another Pythagorean, who wasn't just pondering abstract ideas. He was actually inventing things like the screw and the crane.
A practical mind, for sure.
But he also had a rather low opinion of pleasure, calling it a pestilence that opposed self-control. That's a pretty strong stance.
Archytas definitely emphasized temperance, and he had that somewhat cynical view of human honesty. He famously said that a man without deceit was as rare as a fish without bones.
Makes you think about how perceptions of human nature haven't changed all that much.
Not really, no.
Moving on to Socrates, the ultimate master of questions. He wasn't about providing answers, but about getting people to think for themselves, right?
Exactly. Socrates was a fundamental skeptic in the best sense of the word. His famous method of questioning, it was designed to help individuals discover their own inherent understanding.
Uncover it, almost.
Precisely. He believed that the whole world around us served as a school of virtue, constantly offering opportunities for learning. His key insight was that true knowledge comes from within.
And his ideas about the soul are really compelling. The notion that the soul exists before the body, already possessing all knowledge.
Right.
But that this knowledge becomes dormant when we enter the physical world.
That's right. Socrates believed that through thoughtful dialogue and examination of the world around us, we could actually recover this lost knowledge.
Like jogging the soul's memory.
Kind of, yeah. His use of irony and inductive reasoning wasn't just a debating tactic. It was a way to stimulate that inner soul power and bring understanding to the surface.
It's often said that his primary focus was on humanity itself understanding ourselves.
Yes, very much so.
And he saw philosophy as the path to true happiness, with the twin aims of contemplating the divine and freeing the soul from the limitations of our physical senses. That's a pretty high bar for philosophy.
For Socrates, philosophy wasn't just an intellectual pursuit. It was the very means to achieve genuine fulfillment and to understand our place within the grand scheme of existence. It was about living an examined life.
Now let's shift to Baruch de Spinoza. His concept of God is incredibly all-encompassing, isn't it? Almost a fundamental substance of reality itself.
Absolutely. Spinoza conceived of God as being absolutely self-existent, meaning God doesn't depend on anything else for existence or understanding.
Okay.
He believed that we can only grasp God's nature through its fundamental attributes, which he identified as extension. Think of physical substance and thought consciousness.
So God is reality, essentially.
That's the core insight, yes.
Yeah.
For Spinoza, God is reality.
And these attributes then combine into what he described as thing, matter, and mind. But even matter, something we tend to think of as solid and inert. It had more dynamic nature for Spinoza.
What's fascinating is that while Spinoza acknowledged that matter fills space, he ultimately believed that at its most fundamental level, it consists of incredibly tiny units of divine energy.
Divine energy.
Yes, that don't actually occupy physical space in the way we normally understand it. It's a very different way of looking at the building blocks of reality.
Then we have Arthur Schopenhauer, who places a huge emphasis on the will as the driving force behind everything.
Ah, the will.
It's a pretty central concept in his philosophy.
For Schopenhauer, the true focus of philosophy is understanding this underlying will, this blind striving force, and then learning how to elevate our minds to gain some control over it.
Right.
He famously used the analogy of the will as a strong, sightless person carrying the intellect, which is weak and lame but has the gift of sight.
That's a really striking image. Powerful way to visualize the relationship between our desires and our reason.
Isn't it? And he saw this will as the tireless cause of everything that manifests in the universe, with all of nature being a product of it.
Even our brain, the organ of thought, and our hand, the instrument of action.
Expressions of this underlying will, exactly. Schopenhauer argued that our intellectual and emotional lives largely serve the purposes of this will, constantly trying to rationalize and justify its often irrational desires. He saw genius as a rare state where the intellect manages to gain some supremacy over the will, leading to a life governed more by reason than by fleeting impulses.
He even found a key strength of Christianity in its pessimistic view of the world and its emphasis on overcoming individual will.
Yes, he did.
And he drew strong parallels between his own philosophy and Buddhism, seeing nirvana as the ultimate state of liberation through the subjugation of this relentless will. That's a connection you don't always think about.
It's quite direct in his writing. For Schopenhauer, life itself, as a constant manifestation of this insatiable will to live, was ultimately a source of suffering.
A misfortune, even.
He believed that the true philosopher recognizes the inherent misfortune of existence and even understands the wisdom of death, resisting the primal urge to reproduce and perpetuate this cycle of striving. It's a rather sobering perspective.
Definitely. Now let's shift from individual philosophers to a grand, encompassing model of the cosmos, the Ptolemaic system. Most of us learn about it as an outdated astronomical model with the Earth at the center.
Right, the geocentric model.
But there was a deeper philosophical dimension to it, wasn't there?
Absolutely. While modern astronomy has long since moved beyond it, it's crucial to understand that the Ptolemaic system wasn't just an attempt at literal astronomical accuracy.
Okay.
It was also a profound philosophical representation of the relationships between the divine and the elemental aspects that exist within every creature, including the cosmos itself. The key insight is that it was a symbolic map as much as a physical one.
So those three concentric circles of the zodiac that surrounded the planetary orbits weren't just charting the path of the stars, they had a symbolic meaning.
Exactly. They were understood to represent the threefold spiritual constitution of the universe.
Threefold.
And the orbits of the planets themselves were seen as the governors of the world, influencing events and beings within it. Meanwhile, the four elemental spheres at the very center, earth, water, air, and fire, symbolize the fundamental physical makeup of both humankind and the entire universe.
So it was more like a diagram illustrating the interconnectedness of all things, a cross-section of these fundamental energies, rather than a strictly literal depiction of celestial mechanics.
Precisely. The planets and elements that Ptolemy described weren't necessarily identical to how modern science understands them. His system was a philosophical framework for understanding the inner workings of existence, the interplay between the spiritual and the material.
Okay, now let's step into the intriguing realm of ancient mystery traditions. We have quite a few to touch on, starting with the Druids.
Ah, the Druids. Fascinating group.
They had a moral code that applied to everyone, but then a deeper, more esoteric teaching reserved for those who were initiated, right?
That's correct. The Druids had a public moral code that guided the everyday lives of their society. However, their esoteric doctrines, the deeper understandings about the nature of reality and the soul, were kept secret.
Revealed only to
Yield only to those who underwent rigorous initiation. And the requirements were quite demanding: good family reputation, high moral character, proving their strength of mind and will.
And they held some fascinating beliefs, including the immortality of the soul and even the concepts of transmigration and reincarnation.
Yes, very much so.
It sounds like they envisioned a continuous cycle of learning and growth across multiple lifetimes. That's a perspective shared by many ancient traditions.
They also believed in a form of purgatory, a transitional state, and the eventual salvation of all souls, though some might need several earthly returns to fully learn the necessary lessons.
Right.
And their archdruid, the highest spiritual authority, possessed some rather remarkable ceremonial objects, like the Eohan Maran, or breastplate of judgment, said to have quite potent properties.
A breastplate that could supposedly constrict and even strangle anyone who dared to tell a lie while wearing it? That's quite the lie detector.
It could fit intimidating, yeah. And along with that, a tiara symbolizing the rising sun and a magical brooch. They also used symbolic tools like a golden sickle for harvesting mistletoe and a crescent-shaped scepter known as a cornon.
The symbolism seems very connected to the natural world.
Absolutely. And their initiation ceremony reportedly involved a symbolic glass boat, the Cruerg Gwydrin, which represented the moon, a vessel carrying the essence of life across the cosmic waters of eternity. It's all very evocative imagery.
Next, we have the Eleusinian Mysteries, honoring the goddesses Ceres and Persephone. These were apparently incredibly significant and highly respected throughout the ancient Greek world.
Indeed. The initiates of the Eleusinian Mysteries were renowned throughout Greece for their profound philosophical insights and their exemplary moral conduct.
Wow.
Their influence even spread to Rome and Britain, and their core principles are believed to have been preserved and reflected in the philosophy of Plato. That speaks to their lasting impact.
Founded way back around 1400 BC, it's astonishing how long these traditions endured. And their symbolism sounds incredibly rich. Symbolic gates for birth and death.
Yes, representing the passage. A statue of Ceres symbolizing the upper world and life, and even a black stone that represented the divine invisibility, the unknowable aspect of the sacred.
Divine invisibility.
Interesting.
They also used the human form as a representation of supreme reason and attributed luminous elements, light itself, to the gods. It was a complex and layered system of symbols designed to convey deep spiritual truths about life, death, and the nature of the divine.
Then we have the Orphic mysteries, with the mythical figure of Orpheus serving as this central symbolic representation of ancient Greek wisdom and the power of harmony.
Orpheus, yeah. Often depicted as the son of Apollo, god of light and music, and Calliope, the muse of epic poetry. He embodies that ancient wisdom tradition revealed through harmony and art.
And the story of Eurydice, the tragic myth of Eurydice, lost to the underworld. It often symbolizes humanity's potential to lose touch with its own innate spiritual understanding through false knowledge, or perhaps attachment to the physical.
And his failed attempt to bring her back.
Symbolizes maybe misjudging that innate understanding, or the difficulty of rescuing the soul once it's entangled.
And the dramatic story of Orpheus being violently torn apart by the Ciconian women is often interpreted as representing the destructive impact of conflicting theological factions on the unity of truth, isn't it?
Precisely. Warring interpretations destroying the core message. But even in this destruction, the severed head of Orpheus, still singing, symbolizes the enduring nature of the core esoteric doctrines. They survive.
Wow.
His lyre, with its 7 strings, represents the secret teachings and the 7 fundamental divine truths. And the subsequent allegory of Orpheus reincarnating as a swan signifies the continuation of these spiritual truths passed down through illumined initiates.
Carrying the wisdom across generations.
Yeah.
The Bacchic, or Dionysiac rites, sound a bit more wild and ecstatic, centered around the figure of Bacchus or Dionysus.
It's definitely more ecstatic.
The allegory of him being torn apart by the Titans after being distracted by his own reflection in a mirror is quite symbolic.
That mirror represents humanity's fascination with the material world, the illusions of self-perception, which can lead to a fragmentation of our true nature.
Right.
But the crucial point is that Pallas Athena managed to save his heart, which allowed for his eventual rebirth.
Ah, the heart survives.
And the subsequent myth of humanity being created from the ashes of the Titans, who had consumed parts of Bacchus, it suggests that our mortal existence inherently contains a spark of the divine, a portion of that Bacchic life force.
Interesting. Now let's touch on the legendary island civilization of Atlantis.
Always a captivating topic.
It's often portrayed as a lost golden age and a potential source for much of the ancient religious, philosophical, and scientific knowledge that we see in later cultures.
The enduring allure of Atlantis stems from Plato's account and those intriguing claims made by Egyptian priests about ancient records inscribed on pillars, records supposedly documenting its existence and destruction.
Right.
This has fueled the idea of Atlantis as a highly advanced civilization that vanished beneath the waves, carrying with it a vast reservoir of ancient wisdom.
And it's often suggested that elements of Atlantean culture, like sun worship and key symbols like the cross and the serpent, may have found their way into both early Christianity and various pagan traditions.
That's a common thread in the literature, yeah. Even the Mesoamerican concept of the plumed serpent is sometimes linked back, suggesting distant Atlantean origins. It paints a picture of a very influential, though lost, civilization.
A source point, almost.
Many proponents believe that Atlantis was the central hub of a global wisdom religion, featuring a magnificent pyramidal temple and a lineage of initiate priests who preserved and disseminated universal knowledge.
The Kabbalah mysteries of Samothrace were also highly regarded, reportedly second only to the Eleusinian mysteries in esteem.
Yes, very respected. Their doctrines, particularly those concerning Mercury or Hermes, were said to have originated with the Pelasgians, but their specific rituals were shrouded in great secrecy.
What were the Kabbalah themselves thought to be?
Views varied. Some saw them as representing the 7 spirits of fire, or the 7 sacred wanderers, what we now know as the planets. Their rituals reportedly involved a highly symbolic reenactment of a murder and subsequent funeral, but the details, closely guarded secrets, adds to the mystique.
Then we have Hermeticism, attributed to the mythical figure of Hermes Trismegistus,
The thrice greatest Hermes.
often identified with the Greek Hermes in the Egyptian thought, a patron of wisdom, writing, time.
Whether Hermes Trismegistus was a single historical sage or maybe a personification of a lineage of enlightened thinkers, the body of writings attributed to him, the Hermetica, were deeply respected by alchemists, magicians, philosophers for centuries.
And there's a foundational text.
Yes. Describing Hermes' mystical vision, where Poimandres, the mind of the universe, reveals creation as a separation of primordial light from darkness, followed by the emergence of the divine word.
And a core teaching of Hermeticism seems to be that ignorance is what leads us to believe in the finality of death.
Right.
Because we mistakenly identify with our mortal physical bodies. True understanding, however, of the nature of life and light leads to the realization of our own eternal nature.
Exactly. It's about shifting your fundamental perception of reality. It's a path of inner knowledge, self-realization, aimed at transcending ordinary limitations and recognizing our connection to the eternal source.
Let's touch briefly on some specific examples within the Egyptian mysteries. The Temple of Serapis sounds like it had some pretty intense and elaborate initiation rites.
Oh, definitely. Designed to test both moral character and physical courage. Beneath the temple, which was sadly destroyed, archaeologists found evidence of intricate mechanical devices, very likely used in these nocturnal initiation ceremonies.
So the neophytes faced ordeals.
Challenging ordeals, both moral and physical, designed to push them to their limits.
Imagine having to confront the figure of Serapis himself, this incredibly awe-inspiring image, maybe lit by unseen lights after enduring all those trials.
The psychological impact must have been immense. The goal of these elaborate mysteries was to deeply imprint profound spiritual truths onto the initiates through powerful symbolic encounters, engaging all senses and emotions.
And the enduring myth of Osiris and Isis is so central to Egyptian thought. Osiris as the sun, intellectual light.
Traveling, sharing wisdom, even recognized by the Greeks as Dionysus or Bacchus, shows that shared understanding across cultures.
Then his brother, Typhon, evil, plots against him,
leading to Osiris's death. But Osiris is eventually avenged by his son. The belief that the souls of the gods become stars. Isis is the dog star, Typhon the bear. That's an interesting element, though its widespread acceptance is, well, debated.
And Isis is so often depicted with that distinctive headdress in the shape of an empty throne chair.
Which is actually her hieroglyph.
Right. And headdresses in Egyptian iconography seem to have held significant meaning.
Representing the subtle auric bodies or energy fields of superhuman intelligences. Something modern science is only maybe beginning to explore again with things like Kilner photography, which claim to capture these emanations. Suggests a very ancient understanding of subtle energies.
Wow. And Isis between the pillars Jetsheen and Boaz.
A powerful symbol that later found its way into Freemasonry. It represents the fundamental principle of nature's productivity arising from the interplay of opposing forces. True understanding found at the point of equilibrium.
Balance.
And her association with the moon, reflecting the sun's light, and her connection to water as the primordial origin of life. All key aspects of her symbolism.
Symbolism really does seem to be the fundamental language of these ancient traditions, doesn't it? Let's explore some key symbols, starting with the zodiac. More than just astrology, right?
Oh, much more. The word zodiac means circle of animals reflecting the constellations. The 12 houses correspond to the sun's annual journey, but esoterically it represents far more.
Archetypal forces.
Exactly. Influencing cosmic events and the human psyche. For example, Leo, linked to the summer solstice and the sun's peak power, holds particular significance. Some secret traditions even talk about a future point in the Aquarian age involving Leo, called the grip of the lion's paw.
And what about the enigmatic Mensa Isiaca, or the Table of Isis? Sounds incredibly complex.
It is. Those familiar with Hermetic philosophy consider it a vital key for unlocking Chaldean, Egyptian, Greek theology. But despite its detail, many scholars admitted they couldn't fully decipher it. Shows the depth, maybe intentional obscurity.
It's described as having 3 distinct panels.
Upper, central, and lower, yeah. Filled with symbolic figures. The upper panel is thought to depict the zodiac in 4 triads, fixed signs as fathers, cardinal as powers, common as minds.
Okay.
The central panel has 3 triads, maybe silent watchers, plus a quaternary for humanity's lower nature. The lower panel relates to the underworld, gates of east and west. It's believed to connect to Egyptian Gnosticism, 12 fathers, 12 fountains, maybe even a diagram of Platonic philosophy.
Fascinating. The idea of eternal lamps being sealed in ancient sepulchres. Were there really instances of lamps found still burning after centuries? Sounds legendary.
Well, there are historical accounts and anecdotes suggesting just that. Lamps found burning in sealed tombs after astonishingly long periods. A definitive scientific explanation is elusive, of course.
So it fuels speculation.
About advanced ancient knowledge of fuels, preservation. It's one of those enduring mysteries where history and legend blur.
And what about the famous oracles, like Delphi and Dodona, conduits to divine wisdom?
They were certainly considered immensely sacred sites for prophetic guidance. Delphi was famously associated with the demon in a chasm, prophecies interpreted by priests and priestesses.
Right, the Pythia.
Dodona, dedicated to Zeus, delivered prophecies through rustling oak leaves, bird flights, sounds from brass vases. Interestingly, there are similarities noted between Dodona and Druidic reverence for talking trees. Points to a widespread ancient belief in accessing wisdom through nature.
The Pythagorean tetractys, that triangular arrangement of 10 dots, seems immensely significant to them.
Absolutely central, a profound symbol revealing the mystery of universal nature. They held it in such reverence they swore oaths by it. By him who gave to our soul the tetractys,
which hath the fountain and root of ever-springing nature. Powerful.
Connecting the dots reveals a cube, a six-pointed star, layering the meaning. The 10 dots represented all arithmetic harmonic proportions, the fundamental nature of number. The decade, 10, was the perfect number, heaven and world associated with deities, age, power, faith, necessity, memory.
The concept of man's twofold constitution, invisible spiritual and visible material, with an intermediary sphere seems a recurring theme.
Yes, this dual nature, higher spiritual essence and lower material form, bridged by an intermediary level, it's prevalent. The spirit is often seen as prior to and encompassing the form.
Greater than the sum of its parts.
Right. Often analogized to God and the universe, the divine spirit permeating creation.
And the diagram of the divine tree in man seems to be a visual representation of this.
Exactly. It contrasts the regenerated state, divine principles dominant, with the inferior night condition, material aspects holding sway. Reason is depicted as the crucial point of reconciliation, balance between these forces.
The legend of Hiram Abiff is so central to Freemasonry. It's an allegory. But what are the key symbolic elements?
Within Masonry, it's often interpreted as an allegory of the sun's annual journey, death, and resurrection. The three murderers often linked to winter months or internal discord, ignorance.
Okay.
The urn of ashes symbolizes the human heart, the discovery by the fellow craftsman at the vernal equinox, Aries, and his raising by the Lion of Judah, sun's return, Leo, signify life's renewal.
And the lost word
Represents a vital spiritual truth or principle, lost and then symbolically rediscovered, raising all life to a higher level.
And there are clear parallels with Christian mysticism. The lost word found in a stable, marked by a star, speaks to a universal cycle.
Precisely. The annual cosmic drama mirrors deeper spiritual cycles of death, transformation, rebirth, resonating across traditions.
The emphasis on beauty as a pathway to human regeneration in ancient thought is quite interesting, not always central in modern views.
Many ancient savior gods were associated with beauty ideals. Pursuing and appreciating beauty was seen as a way to elevate the human spirit, facilitate regeneration.
Like the Renaissance.
Exactly, a resurgence of that idea. The Dionysiac architects, for instance, were seen as consecrated to raising cosmic beauty through harmonious, symmetrical buildings. Aesthetics weren't just decorative, but fundamental to spiritual understanding.
So the Hiram legend can also be interpreted more philosophically. Beyond history or cosmos?
Absolutely, deeper level. The pagan mysteries, original architects of civilization and spirit, are personified by Hiram. His fate represents the suppression of ancient wisdom by the rigid state, dogmatic religion, the uninitiated masses.
So rediscovery is key.
The eventual rediscovery of the lost secrets promises a return of that crucial spiritual understanding needed for enlightenment.
And the concept of a future great university teaching symbolism as the most sacred mystery. It's a powerful vision.
It envisions an ideal where every object, thought, emotion is understood as a symbol pointing to an eternal principle. Suggests the buried truth, like Hiram, lies hidden in every atom, unearthed through studying symbolism. ultimately connects divine order with creating a perfect earthly government reflecting that harmony.
Light itself, the ancients saw it as more than just illumination.
Indeed. Not just what lets us see, but the fundamental manifestation of life force. They recognized it as essentially a rate of vibration, a subtle energy whose true nature often goes unrealized, the very essence of being.
And elemental music, like in Flood's diagrams, trying to illustrate universal harmony through musical ratios.
Flood's intricate diagrams, like interpenetrating pyramids for fire and earth, aim to visually show the inherent harmony between fundamental forces. Using specific musical ratios, diapason, diapente, diapason showed the mathematical harmonic connections underpinning the cosmos.
Fish symbolism seems surprisingly widespread and significant.
Rich and multifaceted, yes. The word nun meant fish and growth generation. Son of the fish linked to Joshua Jesus in some views. For early Christians, the fish anagram for Christ, key Trinity symbol, sacred in Buddhism too.
Even the dolphin.
Sacred, associated with Apollo Neptune, guide for sailors. Early Christians even liken converts to fish in the sea of Christ, highlights transformation.
The appearance of composite creatures in ancient mysteries, priests and deities depicted with combined human and animal features, what was the purpose?
Priests often don costumes of composite beings to symbolically represent different aspects, potencies within human consciousness. Birds, reptiles, often emblems for deities and attributes. More elaborate creatures like the phoenix, unicorn, centaur, pelican served as powerful allegories, conveying complex spiritual truths.
Even the serpent, often seen as evil later, held a different significance.
In its ancient context, not inherently evil, frequently an emblem of immortality, cyclical life, shedding skin, rebirth. Sometimes revered as supreme creator symbol, swallowing its own tail, totality, self-sufficiency.
And the eagle and the bull, two other powerful recurring symbols.
The eagle often linked to swift forces of the demiurgus, the material active principle, mundane lord of birds versus celestial phoenix. Sun in material phase, immutable demiurgic law, hermetically symbol of sulfur, fire of Scorpio, theurgic art.
And the bull.
Widespread reverence, India's Nandi, Persians, Jews, Assyrians, Phoenicians, Chaldeans, Greeks, often a phallic emblem of the demiurgus's creative power, even mummified and buried with honor.
Even the goat in the mandrake plant held deeper meaning.
The goat, often virile, served as phallic symbol, represented courage, spiritual aspiration. Alchemists linked its head to sulfur. Scapegoat allegory draws on it. The mandrake, root resembling human body, seen as mystical link between vegetable-animal kingdoms. Used as talisman for increase, cure for sterility, priapic associations.
Stone worship litholatry seems a very early religious expression.
Indeed. Veneration of plain stones, one of the earliest forms, often emblems of generative procreative powers, remnants in megaliths like Karnak, menhirs, cairns, dolmens, even Saturn linked to spiritual rock, solar temple foundation, and terrestrial rock, earth.
And the symbolism of tablets of stone and sapphire.
Stone often symbolized Jehovah, or the demiurgic sphere, material creation, law. Sapphire, celestial blue, represented the higher spiritual realm. Mosaic tablets believed to have prototypes in pagan temple pillars may be linked to Gemini. 10 commandments in 2 groups of 5, often seen as law prophets, or masculine-feminine principles.
The Grail mysteries remain one of the most enduring and enigmatic subjects. Interpretations vary widely.
Indeed. True interpretation remains elusive. Some see Grail Knights as Christian mystics preserving ancient pre-Christian wisdom. The quest parallels Masonic search for lost word quest for truth. Others see it as pagan nature myth Grail as ark vessel of world life, symbol of great mother nature, green color linked to Venus.
Even the black stone in the Kaaba in Mecca has a symbolic history.
Revered in Islam, said to have originally been white, blackened by absorbing human sins, connects to ancient ideas of sacred stones absorbing spiritual energies.
And finally, the ancient understanding of the magic of metals and gems, not just material value.
Ancients believed celestial body rays became embodied in elements, metals, gems, imbuing them with astral virtues, often identified with bones of deities, Iron Mars, lodestone Horus. Deep connection between cosmos and Earth's substances.
Let's touch briefly on alchemy.
Yeah.
So often misunderstood as just turning lead into gold.
Right, but it was clearly something much more profound. True philosophical alchemy began with reverence, prayers to the supreme alchemists.
The goal wasn't just literal gold.
No. The medicine was as much about spiritual transformation within the alchemist. They used symbolic imagery, veiled language to conceal true doctrines, often about inner purification, enlightenment, not just material wealth. It's not just chemistry.
And Rosicrucianism, another fascinating and somewhat mysterious tradition. Several theories about its origins, right? Limited records?
Exactly. At least 4 main theories. The most prominent stems from early documents like the Fama Fraternitatis called for universal reformation, warned against egotism, false prophets, described Father CRC, the Brotherhood, secret burials, the symbolic tomb rediscovered 120 years later.
The symbol of the Rosicrucian rose itself seems rich with meaning.
A powerful symbol of spiritual unfoldment, unfolding petals as blossoming inner potential. Red often linked to Christ's blood, golden heart to spiritual gold in human nature. 10 petals linked to Pythagorean 10, perfection. Rose also anciently linked to heart, love, compassion, sunrise. Apuleius even has a story of regaining human form by eating a sacred rose.
And their beliefs in deep meditation, angels, spirits, personal experience for illumination.
All key aspects. Their overarching aim, reestablish global thought on divine truth. Believed in hierarchical fraternity, saw their era as God's 6th candelabrum, time to seek truth. Purportedly had magic writing, divine alphabet to read God's will in nature, predict church obscurations.
A language superior to Hebrew or Latin.
Akin to Adam and Enoch before the fall, they believed. Strongly exhorted study of sacred scriptures for true eternal meaning missed by those blinded by dogma. Bible as the most excellent book.
Gnosticism, with figures like Simon Magus, presented a very distinctive cosmology.
Very complex, yes. Simon Magus' system, universe from single root of invisible silence, 2 primary shoots, great power male, great thought female, uniting in middle distance, pleroma. Father in pleroma sustains all.
And the Demiurgus.
Individualized from pleroma, responsible for physical world and suffering. Gnostic systems often had complex hierarchies, like 3 pairs of opposites, syzygies, from the Eternal One. Mind, thought, voice, name, reason, reflection. These, plus eternal flame, produced eons angels forming lower worlds under Demiurgus.
And Basilides.
Alexandrian Basilides integrated Egyptian Hermeticism, Oriental occultism, Chaldean astrology, Persian philosophy, introduced Abraxas, numerical value 365, saw Serapis as sun name, Ceres to blaze up, suggesting Osiris Apis origin.
And Freemasonry, while more modern, clearly draws heavily from ancient symbolism.
Deeply permeated, yes. Emerged from medieval secret societies, acknowledges influences from Roman collegia, Dionysian artificers, Seal of Solomon, owes much architecture, symbolism, ritual to Dionysiac cult, speaks of legacy of unfinished temple of civilization, invisible structure of moral development.
And Sir Francis Bacon.
Believed by some to know true Masonic origins, possibly concealed in cipher, seen as pivotal link between invisible esoteric tradition and the world, Masonry viewed as one vessel preserving lost ancient wisdom, sort of a bridge.
The role of cryptograms and symbolic philosophy in preserving hidden wisdom is often overlooked.
Indeed, played significant underestimated role, encoded profound wisdom for those with the key. Deciphering could unlock forgotten insights. Cleverly concealed. Watermarks, covers, pagination, first letters, math equations, jargon, sympathetic ink. Study of 16th, 17th century books might bridge ancient mysteries in craft masonry. Figures like Trithemius, Wilkins, Kircher, Salinas explored it. Various ciphers, literal, Bacon's biliteral, numerical, geometrical, a whole hidden layer.
Finally, let's touch on the ancient understanding of the journey of the soul and the deeper significance of numbers, beyond just Pythagoras.
Various traditions mapped the soul's journey. Pythagoreanism, consciousness through 9 spheres to birth, number 9. Salinas depicted humanity as tenfold creature navigating ages, golden, silver, bronze, iron, in his cosmology.
Other number symbolism.
Even numbers had evenly either properties. 9, sometimes seen negatively, inverted 6, linked to gestations, spermatozoan shape. But the decade, 10, was immense. The tetracties, all proportions, heaven world, linked to deities, perfection, completion.
And all this wealth of ancient wisdom leads us to reconsider many familiar religious narratives, right? Seeing deeper layers.
Absolutely. Understanding the symbolic language gives fresh perspectives. Ptolemaic system, philosophical key, not just outdated astronomy. Early Christian mystics' faith likely differed from later doctrines. Genesis, Elohim, plural androgynous. Adam's dual creation hint at pantheism.
Even the tabernacle.
Its symbolism, line earth, blue ski, gold splendor, etc., built in 7 months, dedicated at new moon, shows deep cosmic correspondence. Gospel narratives might fit earlier savior god patterns. Merlin as philosophical son of wisdom, serpent dragon, not evil. Rosicrucian roseblood symbolism. Kabbalah's Adam from Seven Worlds, name linked to world corners type of cray.
Revelation imagery, too.
Woman, Virgoesis, attacked by Typhon giving birth to Horus' son, echoes ancient myths. New Jerusalem as archetype of perfect future civilization, built by enlightened living stones. Even Muhammad's sincerity, supported by early converts' character, suggests genuine spiritual root.
And despite all this preserved, there are still so many enduring mysteries, hinting at more lost secrets.
Definitely. Alexandria Library's destruction hinders full comprehension. The texts survive elsewhere. The cross, life-death symbol, maybe linked to equinox zodiac. Grail mysteries remain elusive. Rosicrucian arcana, possibly hidden in removed plates. Enigmatic figures like Comte de Saint-Germain suggest ongoing presence of ancient wisdom.
So, as we bring this deep dive to a close, the key takeaway is that these ancient wisdom traditions offer us incredibly profound insights into reality, humanity, the quest for knowledge.
Often encoded in rich symbolism, allegory, waiting to be rediscovered.
We hope this exploration has shed light on some surprising connections and given you a new appreciation for the depth and interconnectedness of ancient thought.
It's a vast field, really.
Now, as you go forward, consider this. How might these ancient perspectives on the universe, on your own inner self, and on seeking understanding still hold relevance today? Offer valuable alternatives? What lost words or hidden knowledge might we still need to unearth?
We encourage you to delve deeper into any figures, traditions, symbols that sparked your curiosity. There's a whole universe of fascinating exploration awaiting.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Until our next exploration, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep exploring.